Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all had a good Thanksgiving. As you probably know, I'm Amy Bach, Executive Director of United Policyholders and an architect of the WRAP initiative, which stands for Wildfire Risk Reduction and Asset Protection. And probably, again, you all know that we launched this initiative quite a few years ago as a constructive way of helping property owners and communities that were losing their insurance and having their insurance become unaffordable, and this as a strategy to increase the pace of mitigation of wildfire risk reduction, and then to cement the kind of financial incentives and rewards and programs and grants that make it feasible for individual households and communities and the stakeholders in those communities that support risk reduction to be effective. So I want to thank Emily Rogan, who brings us all here together every month, and is just a very important part of the initiative. And then my deputy Val Brown, who's on, our insurance specialist Joel Loucher, who's also out there in the field with myself and Emily and Val, and Ben Latourneau, who's on with us, Annie Barber, who's on, all UP staff members that are farmed out to communities all over the state over the last few years, doing presentations, working with a number of you who are on these calls, on public presentations, on getting the word out, on promoting our WRAP Resource Center, where people can go and find out about grants in their neighborhoods. A few reminders before we get to our guest presenters today. Please do ask your community to participate in our 2023 California Home Insurance Survey. We will be closing it at the end of the year and relaunching it. Is that right, Emily? Can you confirm? Yes. So we want to try to just get the biggest sample we can. And a lot of our partners who've been so helpful in boosting our numbers of people completing the surveys, we're just so grateful for. So that includes the rural RCRC rural counties of California, and many of you. So thank you for that, but keep it going. So it's the link there is uphelp.org/CA home survey, one word. And then a reminder that if you have any new programming in your community that relates to helping with home hardening, defensible space, and all that, to please email it to Ben at uphelp.org so we can make sure that it's reflected in our WRAP Resource Center. And finally, if you would like to order any of our rack cards for your community, there you can go to this place on our site and see what we've got. We've got some really nice short and sweet messaging that we've developed with help from a lot of you. So without further ado, I want to say I'm in New York right now. I'm going to be heading down to Orlando tomorrow for the National Association of Insurance Commissioners meeting, where I'm going to be co-presenting with a colleague on a national concept of a new national program that would that might help alleviate some of the pressures that we're seeing in the private insurance property market today. So the issues we're all grappling with are first front of mind for myself and my team, and I know for a lot of you, but they are part of this bigger picture. It's not just wildfire risk that's causing the insurance market to be very different from the way it had been in the past. Lots of other things going on, and we are doing our best, as all of you are, to adapt and to innovate and to brainstorm. So you probably know, in California, the situation is still very, very tough. We were excited about the sustainable strategy that the insurance commissioner and the governor announced. We're still, there's a lot of, as I say, regulatory rivers to cross before the pieces of that strategy get put into place. But little glimmers of hope of insurers starting to loosen up a little bit. We're seeing little bit. I was on a call earlier today where it was reported that Safeco was allowing one agency to sell a couple more new policies, that Mercury might be loosening up a little bit. But still in all, it's all about the FAIR plan these days in a lot of your areas. So, and if you missed the announcement about how to apply for the mitigation discounts that have been approved for FAIR plan, you can either go onto our website and find, Emily, are we posting the recordings of these meetings? Where would people find if they want to see Carl's deck about how you get the FAIR plan mitigation discounts?
We have them in the RAP Resource Center, and also all the RAP meetings are on our YouTube channel. So I'll put that link in the chat.
Great, thank you. All right, well, now I am very pleased to turn the virtual microphone over to Piper Cole, who is with Napa Firewise's Defensible Space Cost Sharing Program. Piper, thank you so much for being with us. We heard a little bit about Marin's cost sharing program from Chief Tyler. So very, very interested to hear about your rollout, how that's going and all that. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak. I appreciate that. And may I share, do I have the ability to share my screen?
I believe you do.
Okay. And then,
although we all want to be under that beautiful, what is it? It's not lilac. What is that?
Wisteria.
Wisteria, there you go. Showing
yeah, thank you. That actually was a real photo that I took at the time, but obviously it's not there now.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, seems to be more and more focus on defensible space. A lot of the work that Napa Firewise has done previously is on, and still ongoing, are the bigger landscape level projects, fire breaks and road clearing. But about, I think about 2 years ago, we started focusing on defensible space as well. So taking mitigation and increasing resilience to the home level, as opposed to just the community level. And so our program has sort of evolved, and we're pretty pleased with it now. I'm going to give you more of an overview of what it is from the residents' standpoint. But if any of you are interested in starting your own program, please feel free to get in touch with me, and I'm happy to go into the nitty-gritty with you. So I'm probably preaching to the choir, but you all know about defensible space. Defensible space is the 100 feet around structures. And what you're trying to do, you need 3 things for fire: oxygen, heat, and fuel. And what you're trying to do is remove the fuel. And we look at this as part of our shared responsibility program. So we sort of did this chart just to give our residents more of an idea of what we expect them to do, and then what sorts of things we can do. So it's not just, you know, the government or somebody coming in doing the work. It's the responsibility of the resident, the homeowner as well. And you probably all saw this picture from Maui about the one home that survived in a fairly fire devastated area. But one of the reasons they think it survived was because of how much they had done in zone 0, the 5 feet right around the structure that helped to protect it. So it does work. Defensible space works. So there are a couple of sort of principles about defensible space. One of them is it protects your home from the wildland, but it also protects the wildland from your home. So if the fire starts in your home, you don't want that to spread to something that will then spread it, you know, community wide. And so you're looking at protection going both ways. And also, when you look at defensible space, the more people in your area who do defensible space, the better it is for the community in general. So if you think of, if you can get neighbors working together, you're creating a virtual fire break. And it also provides an area for the firefighters to stage. And the firefighters, when they go through, when they're looking at this from a suppression standpoint, they do triage. And if a home doesn't have good defensible space, they're going to go on to one that does, because they've got limited manpower, they've got limited time, and they're going to have to pick the places that are most defensible. So what you want to do is do your part to make your place as defensible as possible. And I know, you guys are all part of this. You know this. When I'm talking to residents, I'm telling them it doesn't have to look like a moonscape. It's a lot of people go, oh no, I really like my foliage. I like my vegetation around my house. But you can go from looking overgrown to looking a little more park-like and make your home much more resilient. So basic principles of defensible space. You've essentially got, well, three zones that are most important to care about. There's zone 0. I guess it's 4 zones, but there's zone 0, which is the one that's getting a lot of focus now. And that's the 5 feet right around the home. Then zone 1 is out to 30 feet. Zone 2 is out to 100 feet. And then zone 3 is what they're looking at now as the access to your home. So driveways, they could be longer driveways that are even more than 100 feet away, but you've got to get out and you want firefighters to get in. So that's an important area as well. And this is just a little more detail about what sorts of things you want to deal with in each of the zones. So you don't want any combustibles in zone 0. It doesn't so far, and I don't believe that they have in California that they have come up with the final regulation on zone 0. What they say is it should be an ember-free zone. You shouldn't have any combustible plants. They don't say yet no plants. And I'm hoping that they continue not to say no plants, because I have citrus and I love my citrus, but it's well watered and it's not combustible.
And just let me interrupt you 1 second. We probably have somebody on who could shed a little bit more light. And when we get to the Q&A, whoever you are, if you're out there and you have more insight into whether it's like 0, nothing in the way of plant life, you can share that. And that's just a note. If you have questions for Piper, you can either put them in the chat now, or you can save them up for the Q&A. We're going to have another speaker after Piper, and we'll be able to take all the questions at once. Thank you so much. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem, Amy. Okay, when you're looking at the zone 1, you want that to be pretty clean. You want that. You don't want pyrophytic plants. You don't want rosemary or juniper or cypress in that area. You want to make sure that there's sufficient spacing. You want to make sure the trees are limbed up. So there are a lot of no dead vegetation around. There are a lot of things. Your zone 1 is the one that had been the focus until they started to do zone 0, but that's where a lot of the activity is. Then zone 2 is a little bit more permissive, but that's still considered a really key area. And that can go out, that goes out to 100 feet, but it can go up to 150 feet if you're on a slope, because fire will travel faster up a slope. And then the access to the home, the driveways and that sort of thing. You want to make sure that people get in there. And then, the areas outside of that, it's still good to pay attention to them. But if you have limited funds, focus in the order of the numbers. So let's talk about our program specifically. So the way we've focused our program is we talk about it. We want to educate, we want to encourage, and we want to enable. So to educate, we have got our own sort of slightly slimmed down version of the CAL FIRE self-assessment survey. And that's the portal where people get into our system. So they go to napafirewise.org/dspace, go into the portal, go into the self-assessment survey. They learn about some of the principles of both defensible space and home hardening. We don't have current grants for home hardening, but we wanted them to learn about it. And while we've got a captive audience, we thought we'd take advantage of that. So we tell them about it. We ask them to answer some questions about what they observe on their property. We get some basic demographic and contact information. And then once they hit submit, they get into the system. The next thing that happens is their information goes over to our contractors that we're working with. And we're working with Fire Aside and Wildfire Services Group. And the Wildfire Services Group are the people who go out to the property. Fire Aside is our technology backbone that takes all of this data and makes it accessible. So we've got an agreement with Wildfire Services Group that they will respond to anyone who submits within a week, and they will schedule an evaluation taking someone out to the property within 3 weeks. They then go through and do an evaluation of the property based on Napa County regulations, IBHS, NIST standards. They've got just an incredible database of the kinds of things that you can find on property and what the remedies should be. So when they go through, and it probably takes them, it's pretty, because the software is so good, they can do this pretty efficiently. So they usually can do a property in less than an hour, sometimes less than half an hour. Go through, take photos, mark what they see. They're called discoveries for them. And when they get back in internet range, it uploads into Fire Aside, and usually the report is available to the resident within 24, at the most 48 hours. The system then generates an email to the resident. They get a link and a code to go in. They can then view the report. We've tried to make it very easy so they can go from that to saying that they want to apply for reimbursement. They hit a button for that. The things that we have designated as eligible for reimbursement then come up as a checklist. They check off the ones they want to do. What our program does is it will reimburse residents for work that they have paid for at 50%, unless they are low income, and we can get to that, up to a maximum of $3,500 per property. So it's, it helps quite a bit with them being able to do that. But it also helps them to understand what sorts of things need to be done on the property. And the report also includes things that are found that are home hardening, even though, again, they don't come under our grant for reimbursement, but we wanted people to know about them and to have them on a checklist in case they wanted to do it on their own. So once they decide what they're going to do, this then comes back to our internal team for review. We look at it. If it's appropriate, we pre-approve it. The resident gets notified. They then select their own contractor. And we don't tell them who they can select, but we tell them that we obviously want them to pick someone that they think is good, and we're going to see the after photos to make a judgment on whether the work was actually done. but they select their contractor, they have the work done, they pay for the work done, and then they come back to the site and upload their verification and documentation. So they upload their photos, they upload a certificate of completion form that we've created that basically certifies from them that they have done the work, they have had the work done. Invoices, receipts, proof of payment, etc. And then we review that. If all that is in order, then we issue a check. So that's the basic program. And so this is a little bit about the FireAside software portal. And I think we've talked about most of these things, but if any of you are going to do a program in your area, we interviewed a couple of companies and we have just been delighted working with FireAside, and it's been really a game changer for us. We did what we called our version 1 without that, where the resident just went through and they basically used the self-assessment survey to decide what needed to be done. And then we had to munge all the data by hand. This is worlds different. And it also makes reporting to our grant funders a lot easier. And this is, this is a little bit dated, because I think we're almost double this now, but this is what we have put out in funds so far and how many participants we've had. I think when Amy or Emily first asked me to do this, I did this, and we've had a lot of activity since.
That's great.
And I think that's it.
Okay, well, thank you, Piper. And since we're a little ahead of the time that we had allotted for you, maybe we could, I'll throw a question or two at you. And if you said this already, where did the money come from for the matching?
So the money first was part of a California Fire Safe Council grant. So we got a grant and we broke that into 2 parts. We actually did kind of 2 proofs of concept. One was a small, densely packed neighborhood where we did the work and hired the contractor and paid for all of it. And the other was this leveraged model where it was where the properties were much more dispersed, and it was a cost share program so that the resident had more skin in the game. So then from there, we actually got more funding from CAL FIRE and used that to continue the program.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good. Greta Mettauer is asking, can I get more information on the CRM program? I think she's talking about the FireAside.
Yes. If you go to,
so are you paying like a subscription fee? How does that work?
Well, there are 2 ways that they charge, and I don't know if they've changed that since we got into the program, but either they would do it by a community and they would look at all of the eligible properties and take some percentage of that. For us, we thought it was more cost effective to pay as you go. So the first, and I can't remember how many properties that went in were at $25 a property. We're now at $17.50 a property. It is the world's all-time bargain. And they have worked with us to put some things in that that we wanted. So Greta is asking, is that annually? Well, the per property is just per property. So it's, or do you need to re-qualify annually to get down to the $17.50? I don't know. We haven't been with them a year. I think that once you pass a threshold, you are at $17.50 a property. The cost based on eligible properties is annual.
Okay. And then does the system have like scheduled reminders? It's been 6 months, check to see for regrowth, like type of thing.
Not maintenance reminders, although they may be thinking about adding that. There are certainly reminders immediately in the program. We sent you something about your report, you haven't opened it, here's your link again, or things like that. That's really a good idea. And I think they're looking for things like that. Again, we haven't been using it that long. It may be a functionality that we just don't know about, but that's a very good idea. And I think I will mention it to Jason.
Okay, all right. That's certainly something that the insurance industry representatives bring up on a regular basis, that things grow back and they want to have a very limited role. They want people to self-certify through pictures, I suppose. So, this app might end up being even more important than it sounds like it's already been for you. We also got a question from Kate Furlong down in Santa Barbara. Do you have a standardized assessment for financial assistance? I'm sure this is one of the challenging parts of your program is determining who qualifies.
Yeah, we took us, I can't remember exactly how we came up with our number. We basically came up with a number for one person or a household. And it was somewhat scientific, but probably not 100%, but we wanted an objective standard that we could use. And then we asked them in our participation agreement to indicate whether they're low income. And we tell them that we may request verification, which is what we've been doing. We've been asking for the first page of their tax return with their social security number blocked out.
Okay, very helpful. Well, Piper, thank you so much. And if folks have more questions, you can put them in the chat. We're going to move to the next speaker, and then we'll be able to, if you don't mind sticking around, Piper, there may be some more questions sent your way. But yeah, great.
Happy to do that.
Great. Just this is progress. This is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like. And we're so glad to hear about your increasing numbers in your region. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And it actually has become one of the 3 pillars of Napa Firewise's program. So we've got the large hazardous fuel projects, the outreach and education, which we do through our fire safe councils, and then defensible space and ignition resistant construction. And we will actually, in about a year or so, move into using the BRIC grant that the county of Napa got, a good part of which is going to this program.
And Piper, are you an employee? Are you a volunteer?
I am a volunteer.
That's beautiful. And sounds like you're probably putting in quite a bit of time.
Probably almost as much as when I was working.
Well,
yes, but I love it. This program and our Reflect to Protect program, which is our reflective address signs, are my 2 babies. So I've been birthing them for a while. What?
That's so pragmatic. I remember visiting, being up on Mount Veeder and hearing about how hard it was, when people didn't have when you couldn't read the address, or you couldn't, that was a real hindrance actually to the suppression efforts. Anyway, so good. Great.
Yeah, Amy, one other thing, if any of your members are interested in starting their own Reflect to Protect program, I have an exhaustive and exhausting guide that I put together that I am more than willing to share.
Well, again, that's one of the beauties of, thank you, of these gatherings is this informal sharing of best practices. And it sounds like you've had quite a bit of practice in answering people's questions of like, why should I bother to do this? Or, why does this matter? And why, and starting out with the slide about the 5 feet is important, because I think that's the hardest pill for people to swallow. One of the hardest. So, all right. Well, thank you. So our next speakers are 2 gentlemen from the Sherwood Firewise Communities. We've got Keith Rutledge, the director of the Sherwood Firewise Communities, and then Brian Ferry Taylor, who's the coordinator of the Planning and Funding Working Group. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. And where is Sherwood? You have to just, for everybody.
Well, this is Brian. Thank you for inviting us. Sherwood Firewise Communities is defined by people who would use Sherwood Road out of Willits, which is 130 miles north of San Francisco on 101.
Yep.
They would be using Sherwood Road as an evacuation route. And in 2019, we had a big fire come through Redwood Valley. And we were given new evacuation maps. Now, when I moved here in 81, we had a map that had 8 evacuation routes. And this new map had 1. So not only losing lives in the 2019 Redwood Valley fire, but 250 homes. It stimulated our community to come together and form this Firewise Communities. We started with public meetings to find out what the community wanted, and continued those meetings on a quarterly basis, and showing up to different events with information tables as public outreach and education. We've done several mailings to members of the community. We serve a community of about 5,500 people, 200 or 2,000 residences. Most of those people live in a subdivision called Brook Trails, which ranks very high on any list for dangerous places to live. We've been successful. So our program has branched out into many areas. The fire department said the first thing they wanted when we asked them what we could do is they wanted readable address signs. So we not only give these signs to people that donate to us, but we have also won grants to fund address signs, and we will supply those without charge. So another aspect, looking at the evacuation route situation, we looked into emergency access routes and what was available and what could be developed. And we've sought funding and won some CAL FIRE grants and opened up 2 more emergency access routes, which serve as primarily as ways for the firefighters to come into the community and the residents can leave on the paved roads. We're working on a program with the county now to get permanent funding to maintain these routes through a community services assessment, CSA3 benefit zone, where we tax ourselves to pay for the maintenance of these emergency access routes. That's in the works. We're hoping it'll go out to a vote in the spring, if not sooner. We also have a home hardening program. We work with a contractor who will go look at the homes. It's all on paper now. I like hearing about the fire aside. That sounds pretty good. And that's a team that goes out. It's the contractor will look at the home and assess its ability to withstand what he calls an ember bath, which is a phrase that really struck me. And we also have a volunteer from Sherwood Firewise Communities that does a defensible space assessment as well. So the homeowner is left with 2 documents outlining things that they could do. And we also are gathering and compiling that data so that when we apply for, right now we don't have funding to do the work. So we're compiling that data so that we can go to a grant source and say, we're looking at our community and we need 5,000 vents, or we need fire extinguishers, and we can do some bulk purchasing and some real data and our request for grant funding. A lot of time and effort goes into fuel reduction. We've won a major CAL FIRE grant, almost $3 million, to clean up the roadside on the major evacuation road, Sherwood Road, and then the feeder, the main feeders into that road. It's a rural area. It's heavily wooded. It was last logged in the 60s, and a lot of tan oak, and it's just been unmanaged growth, and it's a real hazard. We also developed a safety net first alert system. We were finding that the sheriff was letting us know too late. We thought it was we were getting an evacuate now kind of message, and so we have what we call scanner scouts listening to emergency frequencies through our broadcastify channel that we set up, and so they can listen on their phones. They don't have to be ham radio operators. And when someone hears a 911 call going out that might be an issue for our subscribers, we start talking to each other through a Telegram app and deciding if it's something worth notifying them. We use dial my calls to send out an alert via text message, email, and voice message. And right now we have over 500 people signed up to get those alerts. In the last year, we've seen the sheriffs step up and get their Nixle alerts out much quicker. And so we're feeling good about that and hope that the sheriff will put us out of business. So Keith is also on the line, and he's our main grant writer and grant administrator. And I'll turn it over to him pretty soon, but I just thought of one more thing. But then again, I forgot it because I'm an old guy and I do that. So
Come back. That's the beauty of having a colleague co-present. You'll think of it while he's talking.
I will.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian. And Keith, you want to pick up
Yeah,
there?
very much. And I'd like to share my screen. Let's see if this works. Can you see this map?
Yes.
Okay, great. I thought I'd use some graphics to just sort of demonstrate what Brian was just talking about. We have a very large community. As he mentioned, when we got started, we wanted to find evacuation routes back on the map again. So we decided that we were going to take on the whole Sherwood Road. It goes all the way from the town of Willits here in the bottom of the map, and Sherwood Road runs through the communities of Brook Trails and several other subdivisions, comes back out at 101 up towards Laytonville. And then there's also a section of Sherwood Fort Bragg Road that goes out by the Tribal Rancheria and Sherwood Ranch. So I just wanted to show a real big picture here of the vast aspect. I'm going to zoom in and show you more detail. Here you can see some of these evacuation routes. So this Furco evacuation route right here was one of the ones we got put together with CAL FIRE funding early on, and that was used in the Oak Fire where the entire area of Sherwood Road was evacuated. First time in history that had ever happened, and the sheriff and all the fire guys said it was amazing to be able to get access up this access route while the entire community was able to evacuate down Sherwood Road. Very smooth. So so that was important. Let me try another view here and see if this works. Okay, are you seeing the CAL FIRE 1 update?
No, we still see the map.
Okay, so I got to do a new share then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
We'll do this that often, so we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so the kinds of things we've done, CAL FIRE has funded most of it. Brian mentioned roadside fuel reduction work, and also the out Sherwood Road, and also the Fort Bragg Road area. So those were our first couple of grants. We just recently got our third grant, which is to do the entire community. So again, sorry for the small map because it's a big area, but the yellow routes were the CAL FIRE 1, so that's Sherwood Road, and we're doing roadside fuel reduction, which is 100 feet on either side of the center line fuel reduction to what's called a shaded fuel break. So we're removing all the ground fuels, trying to prevent a crown fire. We also have this up on the top of this hill, above all the subdivisions, is Ridge Road and Blue Lake Road that provide another aspect of access, either ingress or egress. So we've got funding now to clear roadside fuel reduction there. That was an important part for us. Here's a little bit closer look at it. This is what we've already done with the CAL FIRE 1 funding. We're well underway. We also are working on another aspect. Willits Creek outlet goes to the south, that goes down to the city of Willits, and there's another section here in this blue circle, which was on private property that has kept access to this part of the subdivision from either getting up here or people getting access to that. So we now got access to this route, and we'll be opening that up in the spring to use that as another emergency access route. This is the Sherwood Fort Bragg Road secondary project that goes out to the Sherwood Ranch and Rancheria subdivisions. Again, this is all roadside fuel reduction. So that was one. So far, we've gone through access. You know, the fire department gets access. We have access on our properties, and so that's, you know, really important part. Now, defensible space-wise, we've been working with the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council on creating some defensible space, and I want to show another. Try to do this now and see how this will work. There. Share. This works. So there should be a map now.
Still seeing
all
this
the-
slide.
Seeing this the big
There you
map.
go. There you go.
Yeah. So this shows the property lines within that area, and like this area here, I'll zoom in. This is the Brook Trail subdivision. It's 6,000 lots.
Okay.
These larger subdivisions are 20, 30, 40 acre private roads, et cetera. So that's our community. I'll unveil here a little bit some of the view on what we're doing and zoom in some. Let's see, I need to get rid of this. Show you a little bit of what we've been doing. Just as an example, this is the Brook Trail subdivision. Again, I'll get closer on that when we talk about defensible space. That's that Furco route there. We've been working on this Ridge Road route, and what you'll see is the color code are places where we have access and we've completed the work. So all these parcels we've completed the work on. The purple parcels, we're not able to get the landowner to respond. And I'll talk about that in more detail because that's sort of what I want to finish with, is that's a really big aspect to everything we're doing is we need permission. We have funding, but we can't get access to the properties. Now, zooming out again, Brook Trails, the subdivision is basically the green properties are owned by the district, and they're huge 2,500 acre green belt that surrounds a lot of the properties. So when we're talking defensible space, we need to be dealing with all these areas around the properties, and we have the district's permission to work there. So we've been doing that. However, on the, and I'll show you our initial defensible space setup here. What we've been doing is we're mapping out, this is for the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council's grant, 75 homes, but also for the BRIC grant that the county, Mendocino County, has applied for to do 750 homes, both home hardening and defensible space. So what we've been doing is identifying the improved properties, and like here's an example where we've gone in and done the vacant lots around a home property, and we've been able to use grant funds to do that where we get the owner's permission. So that's been a really key piece of it. And I'll show you the improved parcels here as well.
Okay.
So this is where the homes.
And Keith, we got a question from Rainer Marks. Did CAL FIRE require CEQA for the Sherwood Roadside Fuel Reduction Project grants? I guess CEQA compliance.
Yes, absolutely. We're working with North Coast Resource Management as the registered professional forester on these projects. And
Okay.
we basically, the work we're doing, since we're not disturbing soil, we're working from roadways, et cetera, or around homes, we're able to get what's called a notice of exemption. And the notice of exemption still requires the botanical, biological, archaeological, all the various features of a CEQA survey. And if we find, rare plants, endangered species, things like that, we can flag all that and avoid it. We do bird nesting surveys before we do work doing the forestry. We're hiring licensed contractors, so we've got, licensed insured people doing the work with the forester overseeing it.
Yeah.
The home hardening part that Brian mentioned, we did get a grant from the from the Community Foundation of Mendocino County, and we've surveyed about 75 homes. We hope to get to 100. And as Brian mentioned, we're building a database out of that of the typical things that all these various homes need, like the leaf guards on their gutters or different types of vents if they need vents, et cetera. And that database has already come in handy working with the grant writers on the FEMA grant that was written, just trying to get an idea of what are going to be the typical improvements that we're going to need to make for home fire hardening. Okay, so I know time is tight. I want to focus on a major issue we're having here is we have 6,000 parcels in the Brook Trail subdivision. 1,500 of them have a home on them. There's a moratorium because they were supposed to be weekend vacation cabins, but they ended up being 3-bedroom, 2-bath, full-time occupancy. So the subdivision has used all of the water that was allocated to this supposed vacation village that ended up becoming a full-time community. So this means that we have about 4,500 vacant lots that need to be maintained, and out of that, literally thousands of those, I don't know the exact number, but well over 1,000, probably more like 2,000, have quit paying all their property taxes, assessments, school assessment, fire, everything. And so the county has not been able to do a typical judicial type of an abatement where you send the notice, they used to do this, we'll do the work, we're going to put a lien on your property, and we'll collect it when we sell the property. Well, many years ago, they've tried to sell these hundreds and hundreds of properties. Nobody's buying them because there's a moratorium. A lot of the properties aren't buildable anyway, these vacant lots. They're like 1/10 of an acre. And so the county has basically quit trying to do any type of abatement on the properties, fire district as well. So we're working with the county to try to use, they've got an ordinance called the Nuisance Abatement Ordinance that can use an administrative abatement where all you need to do is provide sufficient notice in writing to the property owner, allow a sufficient amount of time for them to reply, 30 to 60 days, and you're telling them that we need you to clear your lot. If you don't do it within a certain amount of time, we're going to perform that work. But we don't have to put a lien on the property. We don't have to go to court. We don't have to file those papers. We can do it just administratively, and where we have funding to do the work, we'll do that. So this is something we're finding it's holding up our roadside fuel reduction work. It's holding up our defensible space work. It's going to hold up, a future FEMA grant, potentially that $50 million grant. So we have a major impetus to enforce this ordinance, but the county has not the will by the county council saying it's too risky, and also the funding for the county enforcement officers to go and do their work to do that. So we've sort of hit that institutional bureaucratic barrier. We're working on that now because there is such a need in our communities. As Brian said, one of the highest risk communities in California, or even in the country. And roadside fuel reduction is helping, but we really need to get to that defensible space around homes. When you have a lot that's only 50 feet wide and your house is maybe 40 feet wide, you only have 5 or 10 feet on either side of the house. You have to go out 50 feet on either side is another lot, and then 100 feet out is 2 lots. So most of these places are impacted by 4 or 5 or 6 surrounding vacant lots. So it's a big deal that we need to address, and from an insurance standpoint, everybody can realize that, you're looking out your window at a vacant lot that has a bunch of wood in it, and you need to get it done, but you don't have permission. That's a huge problem. So we're hoping that the United policyholders and all the people on the call today can help us with lobbying for trying to find a solution for these abandoned, vacant lots that people just don't care about. They can't even sell them. I mean, we've had people offer to give them to our nonprofit, but we don't want them because then we have to maintain them and et cetera. So anyway, I'm going to stop there and see if there's questions.
Well, that's a lot. And it's always fascinating to me when something new comes up, and after all the years we've been meeting and talking, this vacant, dealing with vacant lots. I'm wondering how many more folks on the call have that same problem in their communities, but it sounded from your remarks like you've kind of lit upon a slightly less burdensome, onerous process for being able to improve those, risk reduce those lots. and I don't know if everybody was following. I just want to make sure I sort of put a pin on this, that it sounds like the Sherwood crew has come up with a somewhat easier way. Is this something, though, Keith, that is only working in your community, or could it work in other communities?
Well, that's why I was mentioning that there's a state law. The administrative abatement is state law. You have to have local enforcement, and so it sort of falls to the county, or if you're in a municipal area, to that jurisdiction. A lot of places, especially where the land is worth a whole lot more, they don't have these kinds of issues. It's mostly the rural counties, for the large part. I mean, there's some within the, say, Napa, Sonoma Lake, whatever probably has. I know Lake County has a bunch. Certainly Humboldt and Mendocino County have a bunch, and I think the whole northeastern part of the state, especially where there were these planned subdivisions, like Shelter Cove is another one, or even Bolinas. I mean, geez, that's down in the Bay Area, where there was a planned development that didn't get done properly, and it ended up losing ability to build. It got a moratorium because typically ran out of water is really one of the main ones, and that went all the way to the Supreme Court. So where you have sort of these subdivisions, I know there's some in Lake County, people just end up second or third generation. It's like they just don't care.
Yeah.
They can't give it away. They can't sell it. They don't want to keep paying on it. And so I'm sure if we did a survey, the county right now is looking at how many 3-year delinquent properties they have, well over 1,000. And that means they're not collecting property tax. They're not getting all the other fire services and all the other school district, everything else that's on the property assessments.
So they're nothing but a liability. Well, I would say RCRC, the rural counties, they might be interested in, it's a little bit out of UP's area, but it's certainly something that we can bring to them, as a bridge, as a reform concept. So we have a question here from Greg Pryor. Have any of your counties adopted at least 2 evacuation routes compliance per AB 2911 and the follow-up draft? Looking for adopted California county ordinances. Does this make sense to Keith or Brian? Have you?
Well, I can sort of turn it the way that we came at it. Like Brian mentioned, after the Redwood fire, the county formed an ad hoc for one-way in and out communities, of which there are quite a few, especially on the coast, for example. A lot of those roads just go up into the hill, and that's it. There's no other way out, although typically there's quite a few old logging and or fire roads or other types of trails around that can be used. I think it's something that can be a statewide issue, but as far as the emergency access, the county just finally, after several years of lobbying, is allowing us to assess ourselves to maintain these 2 routes that we managed to get the owners of the properties to sign a voluntary memorandum of understanding. It's a license they can cancel if they want, but it basically says we're allowed to go in and do vegetation management periodically. We're going to use licensed contracts or whatever. So the county has taken that up, and now we're going to be able to go to a vote to assess ourselves so that we can maintain those routes, because that's why we lost them. The road was still there, but it was just overgrown and wasn't maintained. So obviously everybody needs more access routes. That is a national issue, and certainly in communities, whether it's the Oakland Hills, which is one I've been following recently because I've got friends there and talk about access issues, and they're in a fire-prone area too, all the way to places like Paradise or here in our Brook Trails community.
Okay. All right. Hang on. All right, there's a lot of chatter here. I'm trying to, which is good. Let's see. Susan is asking, could you identify what species of wildland vegetation you're managing around the homes in question? Are they pines, firs versus shrub, chaparral, grasslands?
Right. The community is really interesting. Sherwood Road is actually the fault line between the Pacific Plate and the U.S. continental plate. So I mean, it's literally 2 separate plates pushed up against each other, and you can really see it in the vegetation and the rock and every other thing. The western side of the properties is mostly redwood and fir, sort of coastal environment. After all the logging of the redwood and fir, the tan oak and the madrone and maple to some extent where there's water have grown back in. The conifers are now starting to top over those broadleaf again, and if they're left alone long enough, they will eventually grow back into a mature forest. The east side of Sherwood Road is more of a grassy pine, oak, kind of rolling hills, so it's quite a bit different vegetation-wise. The Brook Trail subdivision has been really our main focus, and there it's for the most part is the very dense fir and redwood, not so much pine. It's a little too dark and damp for the pine trees in there. Apparently, I mean, they do better on the eastern side of Sherwood Road. Manzanita as a bush is an issue, and we've been able to train up those manzanitas, get the fuel off the ground, but keep the bushes so to still get some vegetation there and hold the soil together. One of the big things we're after is the shaded fuel break aspect, where we want to remove the fuels from the floor and any ladder fuels limbing up, et cetera, but we want to leave a canopy. We want as much as possible to keep a canopy so we slow down the regrowth underneath. So that's where you're not really, as somebody mentioned earlier, we're not cutting, to the dirt. We want to leave a lot of vegetation, but we want to prevent the ground fire getting into the ground fire.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, it sounds like you guys are doing innovative work up there, just like everybody else on the call. There's been some really good shares in the chat. The fire ecology article, the second link should work. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Susan. The reflect to protect information, really helpful. The name of the program that Piper's group is using to help residents track projects. Really great information, great stuff. I do not believe we have set the date for our January meeting. Oh, do we?
No, we haven't set the date for January yet.
Okay. All right. But I can guarantee we're going to have a blockbuster speaker, very interesting, I'm sure, as all of the three folks have been today, and all of our speakers. I don't think we've had a dud yet. So I can assure you your time will be well spent when you join us again in January. We will be sending out a notice, of course, as we always do. I am going to really, I've made my own little New Year's resolution to try to get some more insurance folks to listen in on these meetings, because there's so much activity going on, so much coordination, innovation, and that I think they need to be hearing about it. Let's see, we got a message from Bill Tyler, Novato, AB 2911, among other things. Requires honor before every 5 years. Secondary. Okay, this is as to the egress. To survey local governments, and identify existing subdivisions that don't have a secondary egress route. So you're paying attention to that because the law requires it. So, and because we have all learned lessons the very, very, very hard way. Anyway, I do thank again Piper and Brian and Keith for presenting, and my team for the prep that went into today's meeting, and those of you who are so generously sharing your ideas and your vendors that you've been working with and your products. So helpful. I certainly hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving, and that you are going into the Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa season in reasonably good health, and that our conviction and our shared focus on wildfire risk reduction and promoting asset protection in California will stay just as strong in the new year as it's been this year. So with that, I want to wish you all healthy, happy holiday season and new year, and that's a wrap.
Thanks.